So after 38 years at the New York Times, Michiko Kakutani stepped down as their resident Pulitzer Prize-winning book critic. This sparked a flurry of think pieces that examined her role in literary criticism and put forth the argument that she is perhaps the most powerful and influential book critic in the English-speaking world. Now, I'll have to take their word for it. She doesn't have the same name recognition as someone like a Roger Ebert, but she's got enough cred to get mentioned in episodes of Sex and the City, Girls, as well as the OC. She's the platonic ideal of a literary critic, the Edna Mode of the bookish set. A review from her couldn't boost the book sale like a single mention from Oprah could. She's still credited with launching the careers of David Foster Wallace, Jonathan Franzen, George Saunders, Zadie Smith, among others. And a positive review from her is likened to having the good fairy touch you on the shoulder with her wand, but a bad review could be equally devastating and is likened to having surgery without anesthesia. Kakutani could be ruthless in her criticism, scathing but never cruel, critical but not contemptuous. She wasn't hurling snark down from her ivory tower, but still that didn't stop her from calling out books as loose, baggy monsters, corrosive, cacophonous, portentous, and lumpy. And I like that. Here at ThePoptimist, I tend towards the enthusiastic. With the sheer number of books that are out there, a lamentable number that I will never read in my lifetime, and the subjective nature of criticism, I wonder why I'd even bother with a negative review. I would never smear a debut author's work, and there's that argument that unless you've written a book yourself, you can't appreciate the sheer amount of effort and craft that goes into that particular endeavor. And the amateur criticism that goes on here on BookTube and on Goodreads is akin to handing a child a loaded weapon and is something best left to professionals. Okay, maybe. There are bad reviewers out there, but it's criticism is just part of a larger conversation. How else do you center books unless you talk about them? The thing is, talking about them is hard. Improving the language of thoughtful criticism gives us better tools to discuss books. And I think that's a good thing. It's one thing to preach to the converted here on BookTube. It's another to engage with individuals outside of our online sphere. I like thinking about books. I review everything I read on Goodreads, and the ones I really like I tend to talk about here on BookTube. I've talked in the past how most of our reviews cluster around the 3 to 4 star range because anything less than that I tend to DNF, so I'm rarely scathing in my reviews. But there is something to be said for reviewers tearing a book a new one. It's always open season on Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey. Those are easy pickings. Far harder to eviscerate the latest buzzy read in an objective way. Done well, this is hugely informative, wildly entertaining, and I wish I was better at it. But I guess it's just as well considering how thin-skinned authors can be at people who are leveling criticism at their baby. Franzen called Kakutani the stupidest person in New York, and Susan Sontag, after a particularly blistering review, dismissed it as stupid, shallow, and not to the point. But you do not have to be a New York Times critic to garner the ire of authors. Anne Rice famously wrote a 1,200-word screed on Amazon after a bunch of bad reviews of her book, The Blood Canticle, and she said, in part, "Your stupid, arrogant assumptions about me and what I'm doing are slander. You've used the site as if it were a public urinal to publish falsehood and lies." But that is mild compared to superstalker Richard Britton, who, after a poor review of his debut novel, The World Rose, did some research, found out who the 18-year-old critic was, flew from London to Scotland, staked out her place of work at the grocery, crept up behind her, and smashed her over the head with a wine bottle. So, maybe that's why Kakutani is famously reclusive. Kakutani was notoriously camera shy. The photo used to accompany those pieces announcing her departure tended to be a photo that's nearly a decade old, and her invisibility in the real world extended to the page as well. Kakutani never appears in her reviews. I is a pronoun. You will never see in a Kakutani review, and that's what makes it feel all the more academic and sharp. Now you contrast that with BookTube, where we regularly trade in our personality. The eye of the reviewer is always evident, front and center on screen. And that is honestly part of the charm of BookTube. I do love all the individual personalities and getting to know them in a non-stalkery sort of way, and I like these loopy tangential conversations that we have. That is the charm of BookTube, but at the same time, I know for myself I need to stop trying to hide behind the personal pronoun as much, where I'm saying, oh, it's just my opinion, it's just what I thought. It's a way of shutting down objective discussion for and against. It's a crutch, a built-in defense against detractors, hiding behind that. It was just my opinion. I have a tendency to insert myself, weave a personal narrative, tell an amusing anecdote, but I think that's important. How the Wangs versus the world resonated for me as a second-generation Asian was significant. But I have to be careful not to veer too far into memoir. There are those that believe that memoir and confessional have no place in a review. We are here for the books, after all, but where do you stand? Who does reviewing right? Who reads outside your wheelhouse and can convince you nonetheless the merits of a particular book by their sheer force of argument? I'd love to know. I like a meaty discussion around books, but it is hard to do well, and I'm finding I'm appreciating those people that can take a hard stance without softening it, with caveats and concessions. I don't have to agree with you, but I appreciate a well-thought-out critique that goes beyond simply recounting plot points and then a string of effusive adjectives. Anyway, I'm getting back on track as far as my reading. I'm looking forward to talking about some of the books that I finished recently. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a great week of reading, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.